There we go. All right. Welcome to the podcast. We're glad to have you.
Thank you very much, man. I really appreciate being here.
Yeah. So who are you? What do you do? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, my name is Matthew Huttle. I am the founder and CEO of Hero's Breath. And what do? I am a voice shouting in the wilderness. I am trying my absolute best to be the light on top of the basket that Jesus spoke of. Just trying to do my absolute best to, be a light and be that screaming man in the wind.
That is awesome. So what is Hero's Breath?
Well, Hero's Breath is my project to, God, it just started out as a brand, just an idea. I am, as of next month, 7 years in recovery for alcohol. So I'll be 7 years sober.
Awesome.
I'm more than 2.5 years clean of pornography as well.
Awesome.
So I am an addict through and through. There's a bunch of other little stuff in there, but that'll be part of the story, I guess. And it was kind of in retrospect, as I was getting myself sober and putting my life back together and piecing how I got to where I was, how I got divorced, how I washed out of and back into my careers, my job. I was looking at my life and I was just blogging and vlogging and just trying to talk it out. I'm very extroverted, if that wasn't obvious already. And so that was my kind of going out on the end. I have no shame gland. So I thought, if I just talk my story out, I'm going to figure things out and maybe other people can reflect off of my story. And it always kept coming down to story. I had different brands, different things. I was just shooting out there, just trying anything. And a friend of mine, he had a store and he just got it trademarked, Mission Nutrition. If you're ever in Long Island, got to check them out, or missionnutrition.com. It's just a plug for my friend's store. And he suggested I brand my content, what I was doing at the time. So I spoke with his attorney, and where I was going at the time with what I was doing, she goes, you gotta change things. You gotta get more specific. You gotta, figure something better out. And one day it just came to me that I was constantly talking about the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's work, the monomyth, this great story that we all live.
Yeah.
And I kept coming back to that. And I realized that's the crux of everything that I was figuring out, is that we are not helpless victims to circumstance. And a lot of times we feel like that. A lot of addicts, we look to numb ourselves through one form or another, whether it's drugs or booze or sex or whatever. We're trying to numb ourselves. We're trying to release the fact that we don't have control, or we're trying to deal with that. I would say I was on my friend had a YouTube channel years ago, and we were talking about that. She's very artistic, and she was asking, why is it addicts and artists always seem to be the same thing? And I said, because artists really feel and addicts really feel. That's so we try not to feel so much, and not try not to be so aware of the absolute pain of life. The stuff Jordan Peterson talks about so very eloquently. So, I was taking that apart, and I realized that, when I look at the way Joseph Campbell expressed his analysis of the monomyth, because realize he didn't invent it. What he did was he studied cultures all around the world from all different time periods and found they all told their epic stories, their creation myths. Everything was always in the same structure. There's a problem in the hero's ordinary world. He gets a call to an adventure, meets a mentor, crosses a threshold, is in a new world, is tried, is tested, is failed, is healed, is tempted, deals with the darkness, deals with his ancestral pain, gets that ultimate boon, fights the bad, has to flee, comes back to his ordinary world. He's a master of two worlds. He has the freedom to live, and they lived happily ever after, except what our ancestors knew is there's this structure to our lives that is constantly told in this cyclical nature. There is never an end to it. Even when you die, you pass the baton to the next generation. There's no end to the story. What we have in our society now is a whole plethora of NPCs, non-playable characters who don't participate in the story, who are just hapless victims of circumstance because they don't choose to answer their heroic call to adventure.
That's good. That's really good.
That was what I figured out. And so I tried to build a brand based on that. I was a Pilates instructor for years. I was a martial arts instructor for a while. And I found that the breath is that central pillar to our existence, to our practice, to our to living. You don't live if you don't breathe. So Hero's Breath came out of that whole meta-analysis. So I've been on this journey for a couple of years now, gone around and around the monomyth at least 3-4 times for myself. I'm actually living a new phase of my adventure. I moved from Long Island, New York to Norfolk, Virginia about 6 months ago to be with my beautiful girlfriend down here. Awesome. And so I'm constantly on this run. I'm constantly on this move, constantly going through the ups and downs. And that was what helped me stay sober, was realizing that the chaos of my life had a purpose, and that it always came in these certain ways, in these certain weird ways, in this certain timing that I would encounter, like something bad would happen. And I would realize that right afterwards, I'd find healing, and then I'd find a deeper lesson in it. And somewhere in there would be a temptation and maybe take a shortcut. And it was just boom, 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 boom. This perfect cycle that Joseph Campbell described was constantly showing up in my life, in the lives of historical characters. And that's what our ancestors coded to all of humanity, was to tell us this is how life works. You don't have to be afraid. You just have to accept it, and you have to answer that call. And you have to be the hero of your own story. So I hope
that's good. That's really good. Oh yeah. Well, I can remember, because we followed each other on Instagram for a few years, and I can remember there was a shift. I think, I can't, maybe 2 years ago, that I started noticing a shift in your content, but also your general attitude towards things.
Yeah.
I think you've spoken to it a little bit there, when that kind of wake up call. I wonder if you could speak to how we live in a culture that will tell us to take the easy route, take the easy way, and discipline is something that is highly frowned upon these days.
Oh yeah. I actually
speak to
I'm
that.
sorry. Yeah, well, I actually just finished. I had a little reel, a series of reels on my Instagram, talking about that. Ryan Michler is a great guy. I think people should be following. I'm sure you do. Michler. He says in his book Sovereignty that the natural man is weak. The natural man is pathetic. The natural man will always take shortcuts, and the natural man looks for that dopamine hit that so many of us addicts are constantly looking for. And we have a society that, is bred for comfort. I say that our modern era is a competition between Orwell and Huxley. And it's like, I just shared on my brand page the other day. It's like a neck and neck kind of thing. Huxley thought we would be, our downfall would be catering into pleasure. We talked about in Brave New World. And Orwell thought we would be brought down with fear and pain. And they're both right. Because if you look at what's going on right now, we're so afraid of pain, we're constantly diving into pleasure. And we see all the Orwellian, censorship and the newspeak that we all have to deal with out there, especially if you work in the corporate world and you got to use made up pronouns for people and all that other crap. It's like, it's obvious in some ways, and then it's a lot more insidious in others. And I think what Orwell spoke about was the very obvious tyranny, and what Huxley spoke about was the more subtle ways that we kind of get ourselves lulled into sleep. I saw a great meme, actually, I shared it the other day. It was the question isn't why are they doing it to us, is why are we allowing it? And so that, I do get myself in trouble a lot because I tend to be very nonconformist and buck the system. But at the same time, I've been a victim of, or I should say, I've been a willing participant of the cultural zeitgeist. I fell for a lot of bull in the past.
I hear
and
you,
I was
man.
thinking about that before. It's like, a lot of people can feel like, they were duped, or they feel ashamed or whatever. It's like, you know what? You shouldn't, I should just speak to anyone who thinks of themselves as awakened now, and then think of, maybe have some regrets in the past. It's like, look, when you hear something constantly and you know nothing different, you don't know what you don't know. And yet at the same time, you give yourself that credit that in the back of your mind, something wasn't quite right. You can feel it. It's the people that never have that nagging doubt in the back of their mind, that just constantly move with the crowd, those are the people you worry about. Those are the people who you look back in textbooks and go, it was so easy. Why did they go with the tyranny? Why didn't they see what was happening? Why did they participate?
Exactly.
And those are the people you have to worry about. The people who, like I said, don't answer the call to adventure. They take the easiest route. And I think, our society is no different. It's just maybe there's less people who are willing to buck the system. There are less people people are far less self-sufficient now, especially, and I think you were getting to the question about masculinity, manhood, is that we do not have effective men. I was driving down the highway the other day, and I saw a car pulled on the side of the road. There's a lot of construction on this one stretch of highway where I live. And 3 construction workers were standing around this guy's car. And one guy was changing this dude's tire. And it was like a 20-year-old kid, skinny noodle arms, skinny pasted on jeans, and obviously no life skills. He didn't know how to change his own freaking tire. That these workers, these construction workers, took time out of their day to help him because he was helpless. And now I just looked at it, I'm like, that summarizes modern males, not men, males these days. It was perfect. I wish I had taken a picture of it, honestly.
Yeah. Man, you're exactly right. It's just, we live close to 2 kind of college towns, Eastern Illinois and University of Illinois. And so with any college town, there's a lot of liberal talk and lifestyles and different things. And I mean, just going into Walmart last night, my daughter was with us, and she looked around, and I think her reality of weak men, I mean, just is eye-opening. She started to make some comments to me. It's like, why would that guy do that? Why would that guy just throw his trash out the window into the grass and not just put it in a trash can that was like 10 feet away? I'm like, these subtle things that are coming into our culture, and it's just, she's bothered by it, but I'm like, it's really sad. And I think we could talk about fatherhood and the lack thereof in many people's lives.
Oh yeah.
I think we could talk about that for a long time, but I just wonder if somebody's going on that adventure journey, what are some ways, because I agree with you, there's something in the back of people's minds, I think, that tells them something's not right. I think some people have been numbed, and I think everyone has their own addictions, whatever it may be. Some people it's food, some people it's what we're talking into right now. It's a phone, whatever it is, other things, everything has a consequence. But what are some first steps for somebody who their eyes are opening and they want to begin that adventure?
Okay. It's part of the reason I chose heroes, Brett, focusing again on the hero's journey. The idea actually came to me after I was at a nerd convention, because I'm a nerd, grew up, and I mean, obviously, not to go on a tangent, but I'm a lot less involved in pop culture now than I was years ago, especially growing up. But these symbols,
same here.
Symbols are important, and the symbols of what heroes to me represented, I thought was important. I want to incorporate that into my brand, into my message. So Captain America, Superman, these are my guys, and a little bit of that Jesus Christ motif. And one of the best ways to encapsulate an answer to your question is, there was a very short run of Superman written by J. Michael Straczynski, the creator of Babylon 5. It was called Grounded, Superman Grounded. And he basically walked across this country and dealt with, there were some cool adventures, he fought aliens at one point or whatever. But mostly he was dealing with pedestrian problems. The Man of Steel was dealing with pedestrian problems, this demigod walking among us.
Sure.
And he was in this small town, and he was asking people what they needed help with. And he was sitting in this diner, and all these people were telling them about this street where all these drug dealers had just taken up residence, and the police won't go there. And the attorney won't prosecute, and they can't go in without a warrant. They know they're there, but they can't do anything about it, and all that. So he walks down that street, and as he's walking down the street, one of the drug dealers comes out. It's like, "Yo, Soup, you suddenly cool? You want something?" And he goes, "Because your X-ray vision ain't admissible in court. You can't do nothing." And he goes, you're right, but you might want to go inside. And he says, why? He says, because somebody just lit your stash on fire. And he uses heat X-ray vision to like light all their stashes up, and the houses just started going up, and they're like getting hoses and shit, right? Yeah. So as he walks to the end of the street, he sees this little boy playing, and he says, tell them if they don't leave this town, I will be back next week to do it again. And the little boy said to Superman, well, why? You know, they're just going to set up shop someplace else. And here's the lesson. He said, yes, that's someplace else's problem, but it's not going to be here's problem. And when someplace else says not here, and then someplace else says not here, the world will change. That's why Jordan Peterson's message is so astoundingly powerful and simple, is because it starts with you. It starts with you saying not here. It starts with you looking in the mirror and saying, I'm not going to be a tubby piece of crap anymore. It starts with you saying, I don't understand my wife, but I'm going to start figuring out how I can. It starts with you saying, I don't want to eat like this because I feel like crap every time I do. I don't want to drink this stuff. I don't need to hook up with all these, whatever your vice, whatever your pitfall is, there's always a way to start, but you have to first say, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to be an NPC anymore. I'm going to answer that heroic call, that thing inside me that just rips at me. That's why I drank. I was a functioning alcoholic for years. I was living an inauthentic life. I was married to the wrong person. I was just not answering the call. I wasn't doing anything effective. I wanted to, but it was all toxic. It was all wrong. It was all backwards. I had to be more myself, and I didn't want to. So I kept, the real me kept trying to crawl out. I kept trying to wash him down, you know? So at some point I stopped, and I said, it stops with me. I want to make the difference. So it starts with me. I have to fix me before I could tell anyone else how to do anything. So that's why I've decided to get into coaching and helping guys do what I did for myself. And I don't have a big, huge, you know, like I honestly, I try to create a method. I try to, you know, different, honestly, what I do, if you want me as a coach, it's not like there's no method. I mean, the method is the hero's journey. You know, I don't have a system. It's where are you on your journey? Let's figure that part out first, and then figure out how to get you started. You know, and I know a lot of great coaches out there who have all these great systems, and it's great because you can just, you know, boom, put yourself into anywhere in their system. But I'm just simply echoing what life has taught me, and just standing on the shoulders of giants and just borrowing their work so that each person can do their own thing and stand on their own, and then eventually pass that on to the next generation.
Yeah, that's really good. There's some Bible points in there that you're talking about right there. There's a passage in Ephesians that talks about the thief who no longer steals. It's not good enough to just stop stealing. And he had to go work and start giving. And, you know, there's some principles to what you're saying there about sometimes stopping is hard, but, you know, most people, they've come to the point where they can say, I'm not going to do this anymore.
Right.
Most people, if they don't replace it, though, they go straight back to it.
Exactly.
And so I love hearing that you're now coaching, which I think I knew that, but for those listening, you know, it's just awesome principles to apply to your lives. That's really encouraging. That's, I think, the point of don't just stop, but replace that thing. There needs to be a change that happens. And that's just really good. That's really good principle you're making there. And I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You're, where's I going to go? You're a father too, correct?
That's
I've
right.
seen some pictures.
I have a 10-year-old girl.
Awesome. So how does being a father play into all this journey? How has that made you and pushed you? And I think any dad, should be pushed if they're taking their role seriously, but how is that part of your hero's journey?
All right, going to try not to get choked up at any point in this, because this is that like emotional vulnerability for me, because as much as I wanted to do, as much as I realized I couldn't, you know, do the way I was, it's my daughter that really pushed me to get sober. It's my daughter that pushed me to get better, because I set the example for her, for the man she's going to choose to be in her life. I can't suck, because if I suck, the guy she's going to be with sucks.
Yep.
And it's on me. It's like, oh, no pressure. Fatherhood is the best thing a man can do for himself. And honestly, you'd be surprised how bad you can be at it and still do okay. People get so, and this is something I was thinking about before, is honestly, if I had to give people one piece of advice, like ever, is stop being afraid to fail. And especially when it comes to fatherhood, we're so afraid. I had, so I'm barely, I'm like the last of Generation X. I'm 40 right now. So I'm like,
Okay.
some people say it's millennials, some people say X. It's like, screw you, I was raised by older parents. I'm still Gen X. And so I have a lot of younger friends who are millennials. So when my ex-wife got pregnant, they, a lot of my guy friends would be like, aren't you scared of screwing her up? It's like, aren't you scared? And it's like, millennials are so scared of having kids. They're so scared of doing anything wrong. They're so scared of, I'd rather just buy my bobbleheads and go to Disney all the time and spend the money on me. Selfish. But anyway,
Man, you're right.
and I said, well, no, I'm not scared at all about screwing her up. They go, no. I'm like, no, I already know I'm going to screw her up. The point is to mitigate the damage. You're going to screw up. That's fine. You're not going to get it right. I think we went to her 1 year or 15-month checkup. We were at the pediatrician. My daughter learned to walk early. She was walking at 8 months. Of course, she has all the bumps and cuts and scrapes and bruises on her and everything. And the doctor's, checking her ears and checking her thing and, taking her temperature and all that stuff. And I just, she's asking me a few questions. I'm talking to her. A very hardcore Filipino woman. She was hysterical. And I said, I noticed you never say anything about the bumps and cuts and scrapes and bruises all over her. She goes, and she's just looking at my daughter's ear. She didn't even miss a beat. She goes, Matthew, if I didn't see any marks on this kid, I thought you'd chaining her in the basement. Because honestly, they're going to get dinged up.
Yeah.
But it's the best thing for you. Jordan Peterson, again, talks about this a lot, is that parenthood changes you into a different person. Grandparenthood changes your parents into completely different people. You don't recognize them. And that seems like a lot of fun. I can't wait to be a granddad.
You're right.
But it makes you into a better person. It made me into a sober person. And I was quite a good fuck up. So anyone who's nervous about being a dad, shut up and go be a dad. It's the best thing you'll ever do for yourself. You get to see life through these tiny little eyes that just re-explore everything, and you have to stop and you have to analyze and you have to answer ridiculously poignant questions that kind of scare the shit out of you, but they don't ask them with any malice. And now you stop and you are forced to start asking yourself some hard questions, because they'll ask you innocent questions and you're just like, yeah, why do we do it that way? Good for you.
You're right. We've got 4 kids.
God bless. I'd say God bless you, but he already did.
Yeah. 12. Well, that's even more true than you even know.
Yeah.
We were told we weren't gonna have any. So, and then we've got a 12, 9, 5, and 2-year-old.
That's great, man.
12-year-old, she'll be 13 this year. So we've entered some of those, pre-teen stuff, which is scary in of itself. But my wife and I have worked with teens for a long time, so we kind of know what's coming. But when it hits you personally, you can't really separate from it like you can with other people's kids. It's like, okay, we're in this. But I've been, we live in a rural town, so she can practice driving and things, and we're going through some of that, and it's just, I mean, she'll do things. I'm like, I have to watch how I respond and how I'm sitting there and I'm driving and I'm getting a message or something, and it's kind of important. I'm like, if I don't want her to look at her phone, I can't be looking at my phone. I'm like, this is gonna be hard.
Oh yeah. Especially because kids think they can handle everything. I mean, just think about how stupid you were as a kid. It's like,
Oh yeah.
and you know what they're going to do, and
Yeah.
you're working really hard to set the example. So I give you credit. I have yet to figure that one out. My daughter's watched me
Hey.
text on drive multiple times, and I just
Well, mine
realizing
has
how
too.
bad that is.
It's I just, it's just a lot of things they teach you almost more than you teach them, I
Yeah.
think.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Part of it's,
absolutely.
if nothing more than, humility. You're humbled all the time. You just, I you know,
Yeah.
you say the wrong thing, or you do the right, you try to do the right thing, and they're all different. So they're all, they're trying to
Yeah.
figure life out, and they all have different. And your story about the bruises, man, we've had so many. I think there for a while, like the ER knew our names because we're taking one of our kids up there all the time.
Oh shoot. Yeah, no,
It's
I
just
never
funny.
we never got to that. Well, actually, yeah, no, when she was younger, she did end up in the ER quite a few times. That was different. But anyway, yeah. Talk about adventures. There's no greater adventure. And again, talking about like the zeitgeist we're up against, especially in the West, we got this antinatalism going on.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, like guys like us, like in our community online, there's a lot of pushback of it. And I talk to younger guys, 17, 18, and they already seem to be, anti-porn and all
Yeah.
about lifting and all about, like getting fit, and it's great to see. And it's great to see that some of it, some of it is a little trendy. Some guys just want to be Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
Please don't anybody be Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate should be Andrew Tate, but
Yeah.
anyway, sidebar. Um, God, that guy is such a charlatan. Anyhow,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's a big trend, there's a big pushback, but it's more of like a cultural pendular swing. What I want to see, and again, this is sometimes not something I have to worry about, is being a bit of a anti-conformist, just kind of want to, the crowd goes left, I go right, is trying to find that authenticity, and also trying to find a point where you're not simply bucking the system, where you're actually looking, as you were bringing up before, is not to just go against, but to actually add value. That's something I had to learn. Like I said, I'm from New York, so like politically, I was just influenced towards the left my whole life. But then as I
Right.
got older, this is where that divergence for me came, is that I realized
So,
once I started listening to
yeah.
conservative ideas, I realized how far right I really exist. And that
Yeah.
was part of my drinking. It's like I had all these friends
Yeah.
over here. I didn't want to transform into the person I really was,
Yeah.
so it
So
was like this
speak to that some more, because I think we have this. I've been to New York like 3 times,
Mhm,
from the Midwest, so we
mhm.
just didn't go
Yeah,
that direction that often. But
yeah,
um, speak to that mindset, because when we think of New York, we think they're all liberals,
yeah,
because New York has been a blue state for a long time, and I don't get too far into politics and all the
right.
things, but I do think there is a fundamental difference in a conservative
Mhm.
thinking. And I wouldn't even line myself with many or most of the Republicans today either,
Yeah, no,
because they're far
useless.
out as
Yeah.
well. And my line of thinking, my principles are more conservative, but
Mhm.
I come at things from a biblical,
Yes,
position. So
same.
that's where
Yeah,
my fundamental thoughts come from. But speak
yeah.
to, like, you lived there for so long.
Mhm.
How do you, do you think there's hope there for people?
No,
Okay.
honest to God, no.
Well,
I just tell anybody who doesn't, okay, so speaking biblically, um, so I was raised in one faith. I'm not going to say what it was out loud, because my family's still involved in it. It's very little complicated issue for me.
I got you.
But I was raised in this very isolated, kind of sheltered world. So politically, I was neutral. I was apolitical growing up. But again, you're just influenced by these things. And I don't want this to be a political conversation, but
Sure.
I think we're gearing more towards morality.
Yes.
And New York is a very hedonistic, atheistic, just really, really crap place. And I grew up on Long Island, which is even worse, because you are completely isolated from the rest of the world. The way Long Islanders live and think and act, because you are influenced by what you're surrounded by. So who I was and what I was influenced to be were two different things. And I had to figure that out. The real me had to come out. And that just takes time. That just takes maturity. That just takes growth, and I had a recent breakthrough. My buddy, Ed Neeson, I encourage you all to follow him on Instagram. He actually helped me, like I employed him as my therapist for a little while, and he helped me to make peace with my past. That kid just wanted to survive. He was just trying to survive. You have to accept that. So growing up, I was raised on the Bible, but I also had these outside influences, so it was like everything was just jiving. Sure. And so then after I broke away from my family's faith, I eventually discovered paganism, the big umbrella of paganism. I moved through different pantheons. I called myself a pagan. And then when I eventually came back to Christ last year, a very good, very pagan friend of mine said, "You were never a pagan." She goes, "You were always a Christian. You were just learning." She says, you say she says that to try to say the word worship gods, she says, it got caught in your throat. You never really said it, like your voice changed. She goes, "You were never pagan." She says, "But you learned a lot, didn't you?" I said, "I did." And that was helpful. So one of the things that drove me back to the Lord was thinking about my biblical upbringing and seeing the world around me and seeing Revelation 13 come to life with all that curved crap, the mark in the right hand and all that, not being able to buy or sell without it. And then it was also Nebuchadnezzar's vision of the statue in Daniel.
Yeah.
And when you get all the way down to the toes of iron and moist clay, and this is the difference between our friends across the aisle, you have iron, which is very hard, which needs to be heated, and then it is molded. You can mold it, but you got to work at it. If you want to change a conservative's person's mind, again, I think this has more to do with who you are inside.
Yeah.
If you want to change my mind, give me facts, give me hard evidence, make an argument for me. Don't cry at me. Don't tell me how it feels. I don't fucking care. Give me facts I could put my hands on. Then you have the people who are just whatever it is, whatever you feel, it's all relative. This is the way the world was right before the flood. Genesis lays this out very clearly.
Yeah.
So you have this namby-pamby, wishy-washy, whatever, whoever you want to sleep with, whatever gender you want to make up. And we are watching pedophiles move their way into the alphabet mafia, and we know it, and we're watching it, and we knew it was coming. A lot of us talked about this 5-10 years ago, and we were told we were crazy. But now you have college professors telling people you have to be more sympathetic to minor attracted persons.
Dude,
no.
I don't understand how
it's demonic,
your
man.
mind can get.
It's just because they are soft, moist clay. Completely moldable, completely malleable,
really good.
Whatever it is, whatever you. So when you look at and this is the important part, when you look at the whole statue in Nebuchadnezzar's vision, each section was a kingdom. But what happens is the last kingdom, Rome, the iron, is now mixed in with this moist clay.
Yeah.
So it's not political anymore. It's moral.
Yeah.
So when the stone, not hewn by hands, smashes the statue, it is God's making a point. He's saying it's not about politics. It's not about kingdoms. It's not about, you humans had a good run. You did what you could. You obviously can't do it. You need me. I'm back. I'm fixing this. Because when all the political stuff is washed away, all you are left with is morality. You have people who are hard, moral people who to work with their hands, get what we can out of the soil, be as good to our kith and kin as we possibly can, be a good example to the world. And then you have people who none of it matters, pure nihilism.
Yeah. This
is the moral line between iron and clay. And that thinking, watching the world, made me go, it's time I get back to my roots. So that's why my brand has shifted more towards that Christian vision, because it was always in me. I just had to go on that long journey. I like I said, I learned a lot by studying paganism. I learned a lot about how our ancestors thought of things. And it helped shape my vision as I am now. It gave me a wider perspective, but that doesn't mean I'm going to live over there. It doesn't mean I'm going to live off to the side. I love that old saying, I have no idea who said it first, is don't be so open-minded that your brains fall out. So that's kind of
Yeah,
where I'm at in that regard. I hope that little TED talk makes sense.
it does. I am right there with you. I
Very
mean,
good.
and I think there's a lot of people who are. They
Okay.
just they can't wrap their minds how you could go so far down that path, because I mean we're pretty close in age.
Mhm.
When we were in school, those types of ideas and things,
Mhm.
well, I'm saying like grade school, high school,
Yeah. Yeah.
you heard them, but they were way over in the corner, and they were usually, I mean, the bullies took care of it in a way. And I'm not advocating for
Mm.
bullying. However,
Yeah, I get
we
you.
have now allowed the lesser voice
Yeah.
to become the major,
Yeah.
and the logical, just
Mhm.
level-headed,
Yeah.
this path we're on cannot sustain itself. And
It
that's
cannot.
part of why I think they want to get rid of history, is because
Oh, yeah.
no society, no civilization in history has been able to sustain this. And why
Yeah.
we think we're any different baffles my mind. Uh, I,
We're not, but people get so self-assured. People get so, wrapped up. One of my favorite things, because, you know, get with it, get with the times, be modern. It's the 20th
yeah,
century, it's the 21st century, it's the current year. We get so wrapped up because we have such a small perspective. We live for 80, 90 years tops. And as much as as much as people are bad at being present, we also don't really extend ourselves that far. We have to have a view of hundreds, thousands of years to really understand what we're doing now and where we're going. And again, this is where the antinatalism comes into. There's so many sides to this stuff, but this is where the antinatalism comes in, because when you don't have children, you don't care about the future.
yeah,
When you have children, the future's all you can think about. All you could think about are worst case scenarios and best case scenarios. And how do I provide a better world for this person that I made? That's me. This is a part of me. And I made it with
yeah,
this person that maybe you loved, maybe you thought you loved, or whatever the case
sure,
is. You made this other person with this other person. I think it's so interesting that that humans are made through an act of love, ostensibly. That humans are made through an act of love, because and this is something I learned from studying paganism, was that we hear the scripture, God is love. We're well familiar with that. And here's what I learned from studying paganism, is that we're familiar with like the different Roman and Greek and Germanic gods, but you have to consider pagan gods from all around the world. And there was a pattern. Again, there's this universal pattern, just like the heroic journey, where you had a ring of like chief gods, gods of the
mhm,
sky and the volcano and fire and these forces of nature, these powerful forces of nature. Then you had the lesser gods, like Jeff, the god of biscuits, and Simon, the god of hairdos. And what's funny is, while our ancestors were paying huge homage to these big, powerful deities of sky and thunder and fire, in every pagan pantheon, the major god, the major ring of gods had a god or goddess of love. Our ancestors around the world, without exception, worshipped love as a force of nature. They were scared of it. And it's a powerful statement when we say, as Christians, God is love. We, again, looking at that wider view, our ancestors understood this. They didn't know God. They didn't know the big G. They had all these other little gods that they kind of saw. Maybe they saw aspects of nature and personified it, but they saw love. And it's even in worlds, even in cultures where marriage was just a utilitarian arrangement, even for poor people. It wasn't just lords marrying each other. It was farmers marrying their sons and daughters to have a bigger farm.
yeah,
Even then, they understood love was incomprehensible. Love was powerful. Love, in many senses, like Aphrodite, she wasn't just a goddess of romantic love. She was a goddess of familial love, friendship. Our ancient ancestors, especially the Greeks, had a powerful, and this is important about men, getting back to what you were saying about men.
sure,
men used to have a friendship bond that was beyond brotherhood. And a lot of, again, now these professors talk about, oh, Achilles and, oh God, I forget his friend's name. They were lovers, they were romantic lovers, they were butt buddies.
Yeah.
No, not necessarily, but they had a love that intense.
Yeah.
And our modern culture can't understand the way men bonded, but I think the people who are kind of pushing subcultural zeitgeist do. That's why they want men weak, fat, feminized. They want everybody atomized. They want guys just being, that's why they like, gym bros are like such a joke, such a meme. But we're out there, working out, making the most out of our bodies, our lives, our minds, our hearts, our souls, our connection, and building a tribe. That's a big threat to the system.
Yeah.
So they do everything they can to kind of just get in the way in every way, shape, and form, because that love that is of God is a threat to a system that needs to control you. Man, God, I hope any of that made sense.
Man, that's good. Yeah. Yeah. That made complete sense. I think there's so much there we could dive into further. I'd love to have you come back sometime and talk
absolutely.
about how to have those conversations with pagans. And I don't know if you got into, Vikings seem to be a big thing right now. I'm hearing popular. A lot about it, and even from some of my teens I work with, they've started.
It's very trendy.
Yes, it is. A lot of this is super.
It is.
I think super trendy, and Percy Jackson was out several years ago, so you got into those gods and all that.
Yeah, the Greek gods. The Greek gods are out. The Germanic gods are in.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we could have a much longer conversation, how to interact, how to, open up doors that would give you some good conversation starters and things like that. So we'll plan on that in the future.
I appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely.
I think, and there's just so much. I think you're talking about pre-flood stuff and how bad. I think personally, I think civilization was much more advanced than what we would like to give them credit for. I think one of my side hobbies is giants and the history there and all those things.
Yeah, brother, you're speaking my language right now.
Far more evidence than what.
Oh yeah.
But it goes totally against the current line of thinking, and in truth, I would say we have kind of de-evolved rather than evolved. Massively. And it goes totally against everything that we are taught. And so I don't think they want to talk about it. I'd love to go to the Smithsonian someday. There's a whole exhibit there about giants.
Well, a lot of buried information, that in the Vatican. And I know I'm going to sound a little tinfoil hatty here, but and again, it goes into the fact that if you, as Orwell said, he who controls the past controls the present. He controls the future.
Controls the future.
So that, when, and again, it gets back to ideas. Our ancestors had an idea of life, that it was this story that we're all living and that we all can choose to participate in. And that goes back to to all of this, to everything that happened in Eden. It was a choice. Everything that happened with Job, it was about choice. Everything that happened with Christ was about choice. And we are constantly having to make these choices every single day. And again, this is, and to just one last path. I don't want to carry this on for too long. I know you have time constraints, but like I said before, if I can give people one piece of advice, is stop being afraid to fail. Our school system was designed to make you afraid to fail. That should tell you something right then and there. We had people in the Industrial Revolution coming in from the rural areas into these mills, into these mines, and the industrialists knew they were too hard to control. So they started the school system in Europe and eventually in America that would get kids afraid to do anything more than one thing, get kids ingrained to think about authority, to clamor for authority. It was our natural instinct. We want to please our parents. Now we have to please the teachers. And we're so afraid to get things wrong. All right. You can't be. The most successful entrepreneurs on earth have failed, have had bankruptcies, have had divorces. You have to try things. You cannot be afraid to fail. You can't be afraid to screw up your kids. You can't be afraid to screw up your job. You can't be afraid to screw up anything. I have been in multiple MLMs. I've had a few different brands. I have been dealt with sobriety a couple of times. You know, I moved to be with my girlfriend. Her and I have broken up and got back together 8 times now. You cannot be afraid to fail, because in that case, like every single time we realized we were holding back. Her and I looked at it and we were like, okay, we're holding back. We can't be afraid of like losing something. And then we go a little further, and then, because we have to go down deeper into ourselves, into our relationship each and every single time. I know some people are gonna be like, oh, is this guy talking about breaking up with his girlfriend 8 times? Like he has any relationship advice to give. That's not the point. The point is you have to go so far into things. You cannot be afraid to fail. You can't be afraid to get hurt. If every little kid was afraid to fail, nobody would walk. Man. And that's the point. Is that the school system was designed. I mean, we talk about leftists taking over the school system and screwing everything up. It was screwed up from the start. It was designed to take human beings who could do anything and make them do one thing forever, and to do it scared. That's why we run for pleasure. Again, that Orwell Huxley kind of paradox. Ooh, that's what I'm going to call it, the Orwell Huxley paradox.
That's good. Yeah.
Or the Orwell Huxley like binary, something like that, because the two are kind of working together in that respect. So that's the big thing that people have to, to understand. And like I said, if you want a coach who can ramble at you or with you, who can understand your failings, who will not judge you, who will give you a widened perspective as possible. Right now, I've been dealing with like the big idea, all this hero's journey stuff. And I realized really it hasn't been so successful for me. I think I kind of get lost in the messaging. So right now I'm actually kind of narrowing down on pornography recovery. I'm going to deal specifically right now. It's funny that we're doing this. I'm shifting my brand over. Is the focus right now is porn addiction recovery. And then we'll get into all the other shit later. Man. So that's where we're starting right now.
That's needed, man. That's needed. It's just
it's a big problem.
I think it's going to be even worse with just limitless access that people have. And I mean, even I'm sure you saw it, but some school, or was it Idaho? I think
I know
there's some elementary district that I read about last week that just the health department is pushing like porn education to elementary students.
Yeah.
Like we know it from data and different statistics and different things, how damaging that is on an adult's brain, a teen's brain. Just think about a kid's brain being exposed that early, the long-term ramifications and consequences that are going to come. Sometimes I just want to beat my head on the wall. Because
I'd rather beat something else.
Yeah. Well,
with a barbed wire covered bat, but that's a different story.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's truthfully part of why I never thought we'd homeschool our kids, but I want them to know how to learn. I want them to be thinkers, to realize, hey, you can't figure this out. My oldest started pre-algebra this year. It's going to be challenging for her. If you don't understand it, we can take an extra week here and help you understand it. There's resources we can find to help you understand it. And I remember being in class and just sitting there wanting to understand, and I had a horrible teacher, but he just didn't have the time of day for me.
No.
And it didn't matter. And at that age, I cheated my way through. I mean, that's how you got by.
Survive.
Again, that not wanting to displease whoever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's one of the routes we've taken to try to help our kids do it different. And I never thought we'd do it that way, but I've seen benefits in it already. I've enjoyed this conversation. I have to tell you.
Me too.
If I had to sum it up, I would say that journey for people listening is, I think they can get the idea that we're just throwing this all out there and that it's going to be easy and all these things, that you just have to take that step and all that. But I'm like, if anything, this is going to be hard.
Oh
It's
yeah.
going to be extremely hard, but all throughout history, the men who have stood out, the men who have faced the battle, the men who have persevered have done hard things.
When I
And
was getting when I
uh,
was getting sober, I came across this phrase that I had heard years before. I had friends in the military before, and anyone who's in the service or veterans listening right now knows exactly what I'm going to say. Those three key words that'll get you through addiction recovery, divorce, whatever. Embrace the suck.
yep.
It's going to suck. It has to suck. It makes you
Yes.
into a better man. And men used to look for challenges like this.
Yeah.
That's why I'm focusing on porn addiction recoveries, because you're wasting your seed, you're wasting your energy, you're wasting your creative essence in a sock, in a garbage can, when we used to build these beautiful edifices, explore over horizons, conquer kingdoms with that energy. The masculine energy has so much power. And again, the people behind the zeitgeist are afraid of that. Guys, we got to give it to them. We got to give it to them undiluted and straight up. If we want to have a better world for our kids, don't be afraid to fail. Save your Jing, and
Yes.
let's do this thing, man.
One guy at a time. That's all we can do.
You, each and every one of you is that guy.
Yes. Man, that's good. I've been encouraged by this. I appreciate it.
Good, man. I appreciate you having me, man. It was a huge honor.
Yeah. Let's plan another one in the future.
Hells yeah.
And I think for sure guys are going to be encouraged to be better men from this. And that's my goal. That's my mission. That's my vision. And
I think you got it, man.
I think they're going to be encouraged to be better men. And I
Good,
hope they
man.
will. Where can people find you? What's
all right?
The best
so
place?
Heroes Breath is my brand page on Instagram. It's HEROSBREATH. So it's at Heroes Breath. That's the brand page. That's all the ideas and the memes and stuff. If you want to get a hold of me as your coach, if you want more information on the hero's journey and masculinity and porn recovery, it's at mentor_Matthew_Huttle, HUTTLE. And of course, you can find me on Telegram as well, because let's face it, at some point we're all getting banned off Instagram. So it's on Telegram. It's at Heroes Breath.
Yeah. Okay. I'll include those in the bio link as well.
Thank you very much. Oh, and heroesbreath.com, obviously. That's the simplest one that I forgot.
That's probably the easiest.
That's probably the easiest one. Heroesbreath.com. Jeez.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me, man. I think you and honestly, I think you're doing great work for guys, and your heart's in the right place. So I think we were talking about before, it's like, screw the metrics. Just keep doing the right thing, man. And I really got to give you credit for going out there and putting this together. And you have a great platform. As we were saying before we hit record, you have great style. I love your style, man. Keep it up.
I've said it before. When I started, it hit me. It was even before the whole, pandemic started and all that stuff. But I wanted something that if something ever happened to me, because my dad had just had some heart stuff. My grandpa had a heart attack. He lived, but it was, it was
took its toll.
Yeah, he was about 20 minutes away. They said, and it got me thinking more about, something happened just randomly. What do I have to leave my boys? Right. And so I started it, and I it was meant to be something that they could look back on and just say, oh, this is what Dad wanted me to know, And that's kind of where it's developed out of, and just kind of, I want to see people become better men, because I just look around and it's just so sad. Yeah. And if we don't do anything, no one's going to do anything. Right. So we have to be the voices that really push what should have been taught for far longer than has been. Yeah. And I think our ancestors, like you have said, knew it, or many of them did. Yeah. And at some point, things got convenient, things got easy, and we've lived an easy life for a long time. Yeah. And it's time that we step back up and remind those who have caused these things why we are men.
And why they are afraid of us.
Yes.
Hell definitely. Yeah, man. Dude, perfect note to leave on, man. Thank you so much for having me, man. Appreciate
I
it.
appreciate it. I appreciate it, Matthew.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.